a reaction to the context in which they've been brought in. But what happens in this bigger conversation about, to go back to the original question of why do Parkland shooting victims get sympathy, be seen as humans, right? To be able to say this thing shouldn't have happened to these young people, is because we don't associate their victimhood with their personhood. But when we look at young people of color that are in poor neighborhoods, it is always the narrative to blame them. They do this to each other. They shoot each other up. They disrespect each other. They've done it to themselves. And so then the question is, so why should I feel sorry for you if that's what you've chosen to do? And when you put this issue of choice into the matter, when you decontextualize it and you don't take into account about the intergenerational transmission of trauma, the intergenerational transmission of violence, about growing up in a context in which people have significantly less resources to basic human needs, when you have a context in which people have significantly reduced access to quality healthcare, quality education. If you look at them outside of that context, maybe you could make that argument. But you have to be able to look at the complete and total system. And when you do, you recognize that by ignoring those contextual pieces, it helps you strip away their humanity. It helps you be able to distance yourself and say, well, that's those people over there and not me over here. So when something like Parkland school shooting happens, then of course people feel outraged. Because how dare that happen to those young people?
And I think Parkland reminded them that we are dealing with children. Mm-hmm. And to your point, oftentimes when you're looking at what happens in these communities of color, poor communities, inner city, and also, you know what, I'm going to go ahead on and say rural communities as well, because
I think we have a poor people's problem. I think we have I think we have a class problem in our collective society, and overwhelmingly so, people of color are overrepresented in low socioeconomic status. Right.
And to your point, this is, and I just want to take a quick tangent and go back into this. One of my biggest problems with the way we view things in America, in these divisions of races and ethnicities, is we tend to look at things along racial lines. If we looked at things along socioeconomic lines, we would realize that the people of color in inner cities have the same problems as non-people of color in rural areas. But because the narrative is taught that these people over there are doing this to you, those two communities, if they were to come together, would be amazingly powerful. They're always kept at wit's end. And that's what I call the beauty of racism. People who are dealing with the same issues are being taught that they are each other's enemy. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the people who are sitting and handing down the narrative maintain the power, maintain the wealth, and maintain the oppression. And so you have a whole bunch of people in this country who, if they galvanized around the youth of these inner cities, this would have never, ever happened in Parkland. Right. But they have been taught that is how those people are. This is not our issue. It is an issue.
I want to also add this layer. Like, we still have a collective problem, because let's not forget about Sandy Hook. Let's not forget about the fact that man went to elementary school. I said Sandy Hook.
Oh, I thought you said Shady Sandy Hook. I was like, I don't know. Is that a new one?
I did say Shady. I did say Shady.
Okay.
But I've been saying Sandy.
You know, the gay man in me popped up. I was like, oh, she talking about shade. What is she about to say?
Thank you for pointing out my misstatement. But I feel I've always said that's where we went wrong as a collective. That the moment we as a collective, regardless of race and class and all that other stuff, the moment the collective we didn't like fly out in outrage and demand gun reform after elementary school children were killed was a, as they would say, a moment. What do you call that? Jumping the shark. I think that was a real moment that we took a sharp turn in the downward spiral as a collective humanity.
I want to also say this because, you know, a lot of times in this country, we like to play, I call it playing the dozens, right? So I am openly gay and obviously black. So in this country, that means I am liberal and democratic and all these other things that don't necessarily actually fit what I would consider to be my attributes. And the people who know me really know me. But everyone else, just to see that, just to hear those descriptions, have already formulated this opinion of who I am and what I am. Fine. I'm not here to really teach people about me. You want to learn about me, you can Google it. Easy enough. But when you have these divisive mentalities of who these people are and that person is, this conversation always becomes about the Second Amendment rights. And I only bring this up because you use the term gun reform. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I am very much a constitutionalist with amendments because I am a black man. Don't get it twisted. So let's not play that game. But I'm very much a constitutionalist. I'm all for Second Amendment rights. Absolutely. You want to have your gun, you want to have your gun. But here's what I need people to get. No one is talking about yo gun. We are talking about someone who shouldn't have a gun going into a school and killing children.
Right.
And I am so tired of people taking these issues and conflating them for their own personal agenda. Or, and I can say this, and you can't, because I know you're an educator. People too stupid to realize that nobody is even talking to you and you should just sit down and shut up and mind your damn business because no one's talking about you and your gun.
No.
Like, this is not the issue. If you own a gun, you know how to handle your gun.
No plots and plans in your garage,
right,
or basement to go shoot up some school children. Why do you feel offended?
Right. That's not your issue, boo. And moreover, why aren't you standing on the side of saying, that's right, I'm a responsible gun owner, and I think people who aren't should not be running around these streets, because guess what, boo? Your kids could be next.
And that's the thing.
This is what people aren't getting.
Like, that is the thing.
This isn't some philosophical... Let me drink it. Hold on. I got to mute my mic. I'm going back. Go talk. This your show talk. You about to get me upset.
I am, because I want to bring in this. I want to go back to this other piece of the conversation, and they probably will get you upset. So you should mute. Somebody shared this quote with me recently, and I was like, "Why have I never known this?" And let me do my fact checks. And apparently, it's true. To your point around this, or to your our previous part of the conversation around like who gets access to humanity and being able to recognize that like working class and poor people, regardless of race, have way more in common than we have been socialized to believe. And so this quote that I want to share is from Lyndon B. Johnson, And he says it eloquently. What he said was, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. End quote. And that brought me life, because that was such
life,
right?
Is what you're doing right now. Why? You know what? I need that to be taught in schools. I need people to sit down in their classrooms and look at each other, regardless of ethnicity or race or income level or gender identity, right? I want you to look across that aisle and say, we got some similar issues. Let's talk about how we can coalition build to avoid some of the problems that our parents are dealing with.
And you know what? This is the thing. And this is an old, this is from the 60s, right? This is an old idea. If we want to get into it, and really people love to talk about my good MLK Jr. and talk about his content of his character and colorblind and all of that, like I Have a Dream speech. But when you dig in the crates, to quote my hip hop community, when you dig in the crates,
you better not do that right now. Don't dig out those crates, because we dig in the crates. I'm pulling out Public Enemy. I'm telling you right now. I don't think you want that to happen.
But when you really look at the full scope, especially towards the end of his life, the reason why MLK Jr. became a real threat to this country is because he was highlighting this very issue. Like I say,
right.
We had a class issue in this country. And not only that, we have a class issue in this country, less organized laborers, period. And also to say we have a violence issue in this country. Let's talk about that. Nobody wants to have that conversation, because at the end of the day, when we start to think about those things, a lot of these artificial barriers that we have created and that we live by, and that in reality govern our lives but are completely socially constructed, get broken down with the quickness when you start talking about people's paychecks and how we equate people's money with their worth and value. That's a fundamental problem that we have to really unpack.
And the thing I love about you mentioning MLK in that context is one of the things I've always admired about him is his ability not just to show people how similar they are and how all of these issues affect them in various different ways, but also to show them the power of their collective voices. You know, I did a tweet a couple of weeks ago when I first heard that they were planning a walkout in the schools. And I said to myself, that would be amazing. It would be one of the most powerful things since MLK's March on Washington, because that would be every single child in this country saying, no, I do not feel safe. And since I don't have the right to vote and make change, I demand that you do so. That's a powerful collective statement.
Yeah.
I'm only saddened, and we haven't spoken about this part of the conversation, and I know that this is a bit challenging for you as a parent. I'm only saddened that more parents aren't leading this charge, and it's the actual children doing it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think part of it is also, let me say it this way. I think this whole country, we've talked about this in various ways and shades and other Dupee Deep podcasts. We talked about it a little bit last week in Working Mamas. We talked about it on Luxuriate. We talked about it I can't. Oh, life won't let me be great, right? I think collectively we all are running fast towards a dead end or a brick wall, and I think a lot of parents are overwhelmed and taxed out by the day in and day out. And I know that is especially true for work. Let's pay bills. Let's make everybody has medication that they need. Let's get food on the table. And I take that as a real. I don't take anything away from those folks that are putting their heads down, getting up every day, and just trying to take care of their families.
I don't. But I have to make this point. Okay? What you're talking about is what I was saying earlier about how the people who are in power